Hi Cameron, how are you doing today? Welcome on our podcast. How are you doing today?
Yeah, not too bad.
So Cameron, you've been making this film Inline for the past couple of years. A very interesting film about a tech CEO who has rollerbladed from Edinburgh to London across 6 days. Now, that as a topic or as a documentary subject is a very unique story. It's not, a crime history. It's nothing like that. It's literally a person rollerblading. How the hell did you come across that project?
Yeah, well, I mean, I feel like it is definitely is interesting, but there are a lot of unique, special challenge sports variety things out there. But I think for me, the thing that makes this one particularly more interesting is the fact that is the tech CEO bit. I mean, he's not a endurance athlete by any means. You know, his day job is running a compliance tech business. So him being on roller skates for 6 days straight is a big challenge to him. I think we've all seen things, of people doing 5 marathons in 5 days or whatever. But those people, that's their life. So you sort of watch it and go, well, you're gonna do it, aren't you? It's a very different story with him, and obviously telling that story is all sort of part of the film. But how it came about is a little bit back to front, effectively. So for reference, I run a small creative agency who specializes in video production, mostly for brands in the hospitality and drinks sector. We do other little bits and stuff as well, but that business was founded in a background in videography, effectively. So one man doing basically everything, and having built a lot of contacts up in that, I got a call. Well, it would have been 2 years ago now, from somebody saying there's somebody who knows somebody who needs a videographer for this thing, and explained it to me and said, yeah, it's this guy who's doing this mental thing where he's skating 500 miles in 5 days, the length of the country. And when I first heard that it was a videography style, I mean, I don't jump on the camera that often anymore. I've moved away from that a little bit. It's probably my least favorite sort of part of production, really. And so my instinct was just to go, I don't know about that. That sounds a bit, mental, and it's going to require me having to jump back on the camera and all the rest of it. And then I sat and thought about it, and I looked at my diary, and there was nothing. We didn't have any projects on. There was nothing on there, and I thought it was coming up to summer, and I thought actually it might be quite cool. That it might be quite interesting to just travel the length of the country, see a bunch of places I've never seen before. I'm very big on trying to visit, a lot of places in the UK. I think we're such a small island. Why not, And so I sort of just took the leap, really. A bunch of people that I've never met before, never met this guy, barely knew the person that was introducing us, and so set off on a train to Edinburgh, all with the thought of just this might be interesting, and it's all for a charitable cause, so it might end up being a bit of fun, and it definitely was fun, and it was tough, but effectively what I was there to do was to help in the effort of raising funds for the cause for it. And so that meant putting stuff out there onto mostly social media to keep people updated with where he was, how much he'd raised, all the rest of it. But the way that the film came about is that, really, sort of to explain it properly, it it sounds exciting, and it kind of is when you watch the film, but in reality you're sat in a van behind someone skating for 5 days, traveling the length of the country at about 10 miles an hour. So if you imagine driving for 10 miles an hour the length of the country, it's fairly boring. And I had very little to do other than to film. So effectively, I was just rolling the entire time, and that included all the banter between the team. It included little mishaps that came about, and when the whole thing was said and done. I mean, we'll get into what happened along the way and stuff, but when the whole thing was said and done, and we were all fairly knackered at the end, I was left with all this footage that effectively was sort of a bit useless. The challenge had been done, the money had been raised, and there was tons of it. And I just started watching through it and going, this is quite entertaining stuff, actually. He's a really great personality. He's an amazing guy. everyone involved, was as well. And I just felt like there was a bit of a story there. And just in my spare time, as a bit of a experiment, I just started piecing together bits of it, and effectively, that's as they say, the rest is history, right? And that's how we've got to having a full-fledged film with all the bells and whistles, effectively. But how it started is a little bit of a mishap and a bit back to front.
Yeah, so you made a feature film by accident, really. You stumbled into making a feature from being briefed to make some social media TikToks probably, and maybe a little BTS, to actually going, I now have a feature-length documentary, which is a very much a big leap from making a couple of minute video to actually, I need to spend the next 2 years editing to this. And we were talking just before we came on here that you've been working on this for nearly 2 years, and you shot this for 6 days, and now you've been editing it for this long. Yeah. Are you finding yourself almost like him, enduring through the challenges of editing a beast such as this?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, a lot of it in the first instance was, I mean, there's been multiple stages of it. So at first it was a case of going, well, what have we got here? Because the thing has happened. We can't go back and do reshoots, So the first step was trying to put together as much as as much of a film as we could with just what we had, and that actually worked fairly well. But there were gaps, and so to give context, the mornings of every day would be spent with me in the back of an RV with the most horrendous rattling of everything shaking inside of it, whilst I'm on a laptop that's moving around like this, trying to edit stuff to go together to be sent out. I mean, I was a world away from some of the, the commercial stuff that I'm used to doing. It was just totally mental. But, I was kind of like, this is sort of a bit rogue and a bit fun. By the end, I was sick of it. Don't get me wrong. So what that meant effectively is that the first sort of quarter of most of the days there's no footage from. So that's one sort of problem that we had. And secondly, obviously, there's the whole back to front element of it. So if there's bits that I wanted to explore to do with how he was feeling at a certain point in time, well, we just don't have that because I didn't ask the question at the time. So it was really just figuring out, what do we have, where are the gaps, and what can I fill in retrospectively through interview, through archive, all the rest of it. And then that was the next step, was going, shooting interviews with everyone involved, getting their take, directing their their interviews towards parts of the story that needed a bit more information and a bit more context, and then almost re-editing the whole thing again to work with that. But it was very necessary to sort of do the first sort of draft in a way, in order to see what it was that we had. And then, as you'll know, since then, that's just the start, right? That's just the making it. The real work really begins when we're looking at where's this going to go, and how people are going to see it.
Yeah, there's 3 parts of making a film. You make your film in pre-production, you make your film shooting it, and then you make your film again when you're editing it. You've, as you were saying, you found there was actually gaps during the shoot, and now in the edit, you need to go back and fill in the gaps with interviews. And how are you so being in the edit, you can actually see the emotions unfold, the story being told. How are you weaving that narrative? How are you creating that narrative again in the edit and doing these pickups?
Well, I think so. There is a general structure to the film, and the toughest problem, the toughest challenge, I'll reframe it as, has been the fact that, again, to go back to that frame of reference before, it is fairly exciting, the premise. He's skating 500 miles the length of the country. He's very entertaining. However, the majority of what that entails is simply him doing that on tarmac for 10 hours at a time. And that gets fairly boring fairly quickly in a film. And so it's really been a challenge of, how do we take the audience on the journey and make sure they feel like they can see him progressing. We're not just skipping we're not skipping whole entire 10-mile distances, whilst keeping it entertaining, keeping it light, and weaving in some of that context. And it really has been a balancing act of that, really. But the general structure of it really is each day has its own feel. So no 2 days feel the same, and there's a certain theme tied to each day. So, for example, the first day, he's got all the gumption in the world, everyone's excited, all the rest of it. There isn't an ounce of anxiety or worry in the world on that day. And that, that informs, what context we provide at that point. That informs the soundtrack, all the rest of it. The second day, that's all themed around the realization that actually I have to wake up and do this again and again and again and again. And so that's a lot of dread, third day. And each day has its own feel and vibe. And I think in that structure, it manages to keep itself on its feet a little bit. So, it's not unlike a lot of documentaries. I mean, they often say they are made in the edit. You can only plan up to a point. I think the only difference was this is that there was never a single plan all along, and the only reason that we have anything to go off of is just basically overshooting, effectively, which is what happened. So yeah, that's sort of been the approach, and we've screened it to quite a few people at this point, and it seems to work for people.
Yeah, Cameron, with yourself, your background is in advertising. Your bread and butter is not documentary filmmaking. So when was the moment you went, I'm making a feature film here, and you're having to maybe use some of your knowledge and your transferable skills as a advertising filmmaker? Did that ever come into play, using your background, your core skills?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, a big trend that has come about in the last 5 years, maybe less, is branded content. And what a lot of that looks like is effectively documentary for brands. So, little by little, I've been directing, albeit very short, documentary form films for brands. However, that is just nowhere near. It doesn't really help that much when you have to take people on a an hour long plus journey on the same subject. But certainly a lot of the techniques that I go to within commercials, advertising, littered all throughout the film. I mean, the insistence on what's the message here, that's always at the heart of advertising filmmaking. We can't just have a scene for the sake of it because it looks nice. And that has informed the film every step of the way, because every single beat has a reason to be there. It's been interrogated to the nth degree, albeit not by a client. But for me, it feels very purposeful in that way. That I hope, at least, that nobody will watch it and think that there's fat in there that could be cut. For me, it's very clean and efficient, and that for me is kind of at the heart of commercial advertising filmmaking. That's what it's all about. There's no sort of time to lose.
Interesting. With myself, as my background being a producer before coming on and taking plus reel, I always found, even though I may not have all the skills in the world, you can always learn on the job a little bit, especially with learning like 3D or whatever. And with yourself, working to creative briefs and actually making this film and utilizing that original brief, and then actually discovering along the way and actually having the freedom of a longer runtime as well to really understand the characters. So interesting. And one thing as filmmakers we know is there's always a fire on set. Were there any moments where things just went completely wrong?
There was a moment on the challenge where things nearly went very horribly wrong. Since then, it's all been fairly predictable. But on the challenge, and this is in the film, there's a point at which the route that had been devised for him was put together by cyclists. Funnily, the route from Edinburgh to London is actually fairly common. However, it's normally done in the opposite direction because of headwinds. So you'd have the wind behind you. He chose to do it in the complete opposite direction, which made it immediately 10 times tougher. And it was because he wanted a big finish in London, and you know, fair enough to him, he did do it in the end, spoiler alert. So, you know, but a lot of that route planning was very important, and wherever possible tried to put him onto flat surfaces, you know, safer roads. But there's one section between York and I can't remember the next place we were going to, but leaving from sort of York area, which is the A1, I believe, that it's an A road, and he had to go on it. There was no way to go around it, and I think if he tried to go around it, it would have added on, you know, another sort of 30 miles or something daft. So we get to this A road, and it's just cars flying past. It looks indistinguishable from a motorway. And he gets onto it, and everyone is just on the edge of their seat watching him. I mean, I don't think I filmed very much at that point because I just couldn't take my eyes off the cars whizzing past him. And, you know, you've got lorries going past him at 70 miles an hour, and the wind coming off them you could see it was sort of offsetting him. So incredibly bum twitchy. And, you know, we're all sort of looking around going, are we able to do this? And technically, you can. A cyclist, which he shares the same rights as, can go on an A road. That's perfectly fine to do. But obviously, he's not a cyclist, you know, in principle, and anyone that drives past and sees him goes, you know, like that, and they can't believe it. So the next thing we hear sirens from behind, and it's the police, 2 cars, pull us over, and basically go, "What are you doing?" You know, I think they'd done the legwork in advance of informing a lot of the police forces, but obviously they're fairly big organisations. These 2 coppers didn't have any clue what they were looking at. They were going, "What are you doing here? You're on roller skates on a road. What's going on?" And, you know, it was sort of one of those moments where we're like, "Is this all a bit of a silly idea? Is it over now?" And there was a bit of back and forth. And to be fair to them, the police basically went, "Actually, you're doing nothing wrong. You've got the rights to be on this road. We're just a little bit worried about your safety. So what we'll do is we'll basically tail you and make sure everyone who, you know, is trying to overtake you isn't doing anything daft, because we'll have the lights on behind you, and we'll escort you all the way to the end of the A road." And it was fantastic. I mean, hats off to Yorkshire Police. They were amazing. But that was the only real moment where it was like, this is possibly not going to be a thing for very much longer. And that was only on, I think, the 3rd day, I believe. But as I said at the time, we didn't know that there was a film being made, so it was more a case of going, you know, we're just going to pack our bags and go home. But yeah, that was a bit of a moment.
I mean, yeah, I struggle just cycling down just my little side street occasionally, you know, to go to the shop. So, you know, anything, you know, when I've been overtaken by a car going 10 miles per hour, that's freakish enough for me. So, I mean, power to him. And in your film, from what you've shared, you do really well with getting into the headspace of where your subject is and how he's feeling. You actually show a lot of his physical damages. You see the blisters, you see the friction burns, and so on and so forth on his feet, and how he's explaining himself in the moment. What started out as probably a very fun idea has turned into he could die. He actually could die, and the stakes are so high from actually what was thought was going to be absolutely just probably a good cause. Obviously, there may have been some challenges, maybe he fell over, but the A road.
I'll share another challenge with you, and this is a bit more ethereal. One of the biggest challenges actually has been the fact it's almost a bit of a contradiction, and what I mean by that is, in order to do something like this, in order to even attempt it, you really have to adopt the mindset of going, I can do this no matter what. And no matter how much it hurts or whatever comes in front of me, whether it be the police or bad road surfaces or blisters or whatever it is, I just have to put it to the back of my mind. I can't think about it, because otherwise I won't get up tomorrow and I won't skate another 80 miles. And that's totally, understandable. I think most people understand that. However, from a filmmaking perspective, we want to be inside the mind of him, and we want to believe that there are doubts there, that there are, anxieties and fears. And putting the camera to him on the challenge, and you go, how are you feeling? And his response every single time without fail pretty much was, fine, it's all going to be fine, I feel great. and everything was reframed positively. Nothing was ever too tough, and I do believe that's what got him to the end. However, as an audience, we want to believe that there's a chance he's not going to do it. We want to believe that he's struggling, and I do believe that he was, but the way he reframes things doesn't allow us to see that. And so that was where the retrospective interviews became so important, because when you watch the first cut that I mentioned before, you never got a sense that he was never going to do it, and therefore there was no stakes. So, getting into the interviews, it was really a case of trying to shine a light on, where his head was at truly now that he was removed from the challenge. And I think that was only possible by doing it after the fact, because if he'd have given in to those worries, whilst he was doing it, he probably wouldn't have been able to. But that certainly was quite a big challenge, and it's just inherent in the kind of person that would do something like this. You have to be of that mindset. But teasing that out of him even afterwards was quite difficult, because he's such a get up and go character. The self-belief that he has in his ability to execute challenges, whether it be, skating 500 miles or whether it be, in his business life, is just second to none. So, that was tough, but I think, in the end, we opened him up a little bit and got there, hopefully.
Yeah, it wasn't just yourself and your lead subject. Actually, in the camper van, there were actually other people. Could you actually talk about the different personalities? Because when I was watching it, everyone, well, obviously we're all individuals, so, and we've got this very heightened subject topic, which is rollerblading down the country. So what was it like working with different subject matters and different personalities on this adventure?
Yeah, so I mean, and this is all part of the fun of the film, right? Is that, again, it's a very cobbled together challenge, which is not being done by professionals. They've never done this before, and he certainly hasn't done it before, and probably never will again. And as a result of that, the people who were surrounding him, who were necessary to make something like that happen, were his partner, who has no experience in, she was effectively cooking for about 6 people in a camper van, which, if you've ever tried to do that, is pretty tough. She was managing what he was eating, making sure he was getting all the right nutrients, all the rest of it. So she's immediately gone from, partner, and I think she works, in tech as well, to, effectively mass catering / nutritionist / emotional support. So we had his partner, we had, one of his friends, a guy called Simon, who actually is fairly well known for being an international DJ, which is another unique aspect of the film. And me and him stayed together in the camper van, and he was the route person. He was, where are we going? What roads do we need to go down? Is there a hill coming up? All the rest of it. He was effectively the producer of this challenge. And then we had a physio guy who would give him massages at the side of the road, which was bizarre to watch, but he was fantastic as well. And then a couple other people who were just friends who tagged along to drive the car that would sit behind him, that would effectively prevent people from ploughing into the back of him, and so that we could monitor him. So I think it was about 6 people in total. But like I said, in the film, there's certainly a quite a bit of entertainment that is just simply born out of these people, mostly who had never met each other, all having to basically, I arrived in Edinburgh at, say, 9 a.m. and by 9:30 we're on the road, we're off. We'd only just learned each other's names, and yet we're all going to be sleeping in the camper vans together, and trying to help this guy through 500 miles. And so that in and of itself provides a fair amount of entertaining moments.
Yeah, goodness me. So you shot this 2 years ago. You're actually nearing the end, actually, the end of the marathon of editing a film. So how's that going? How are the final few steps of post-production going?
Yeah, so I mean, at the minute, we are, at the very tail end, just past a picture lock, and so sort of final touches, basically. Managed to get some great music compositions from someone that I know. We managed to pull in a load of favors, and like I said, this has all been very cobbled together out of really a feeling, really, a feeling of, this is a shame to waste. You know, there was a decision that I made effectively 2 years ago where I had a load of storage that had this footage on, and it was either I can either delete it or I do something with it. And so that's kind of informed everything that's come after. So there's been no investment other than mine, mostly that coming in the form of time and favors, and everyone that's involved is just actually just very excited about getting a feature film out there, and having their name in the credits, and hopefully getting to watch it on a screen at some point. So there's very little expectations, which is nice. That I think that's one of the more positive aspects of this. We're not beholden to an investor, or expecting to get something back. So that's nice, and everything is a bonus that comes after that point. So after we've done all that, the usual, we will take it to any film festivals that are interested, attempt to get a distributor, or potentially just go straight to streaming. And I think it would fit perfectly on a lot of services, streaming services these days. I think it's perfectly well placed for that. And that's the sort of rough plan. But as you know, as they say, make a plan and then throw it out. That's where we're at the minute.
Yeah. And with it coming to an end, and getting it onto the big screen, as a filmmaker, what's been the biggest lesson from making Inline?
I would probably say don't think about it too much. Probably, ending up with a feature film, which I'm incredibly proud of at this point, off the back of a whim, effectively. A call from somebody who, and I was very hesitant and just sort of took a bit of a leap of faith, really, and just said yes. I think a lot of the time, me included, we have a tendency to our first reaction is no. And that was my reaction. And everything that has come after that point has just been, when it came to deciding to actually plod ahead with making it into a feature film, is just going, I don't know if this will work. I've never made a feature film before, but I'm just going to say yes to it, at that point, just to myself, my mind, and go, just see how it goes, and I think that alone has been the thing that's allowed it to all unfold. I had 1,000,001 questions about how it would happen, and whether it would end up anywhere, or whether it would end up finished, or how we were going to fill these narrative holes in and all the rest of it. But most of that has just been fixed as a result of it's all just come about after the point of saying yes. So I think that in short, I think just saying yes to more things if you can, and not knowing what will come after that.
After making your first feature, are you excited to get back and do another one, or are you going to stick with your advertising company?
Yeah, it's worth saying all this has been happening alongside, the running the business, which is precisely why it's taken 2 years. So I've not had a ton of time to sit down for months at a time and go, this is going to be made now. So it's all been very here, there, and everywhere. So certainly, all the advertising stuff is still plodding on, and I think in a sense that's been good, because it provides a bit of balance and a bit of relief from it. Especially doing it for the first time, you can get exasperated with, how do I solve this problem, whatever it may be. But being able to step back from it and work on a commercial for something, or for a campaign, or whatever, is just, it provides a bit of space in that sense. I'm not sure I would go straight onto a documentary next. I'm relishing the thought of having something that is written, plotted out, there's no gaps, and you tell people what to do and they do it, and then you end up with it on camera. I'm very much looking forward to doing another long form project, probably, but probably more in that. That being said, the next project I will inevitably be working on is another. It won't be long form. It will be short form documentary, but it is another documentary nonetheless. And that's another. It's long form in the sense that it's been 2 or 3 years now documenting, and that's been on the back burner effectively while this has been going on. And that's a documentary all about the relevance of pubs, basically, in English culture and in society at large. Obviously, there's an immediate story there, just because they're being decimated, the industry. You wouldn't think it, but if you investigate that topic, and this is what spawned the project, you wouldn't think it, but if you do really think about it, that topic touches a lot of other stuff which is quite relevant today. When you talk about loneliness, you talk about people's relationship to substances, you talk about the public square, public spaces. There's an awful lot that comes out of just focusing in on that one place or topic, which is the pub. And so that's been in the works for a long time. So I'm quite looking forward to once this is out there, moving on to that. But at the minute, it's all just rushes. There's nothing there to look at. So that'll be a big job when we finally get around to doing that.
Another marathon of editing, as it were.
Indeed, yeah. Although hopefully maybe 15 minutes, not an hour plus.
Hopefully it's a painless process this time. So Cameron, where can listeners catch your work?
You can follow me on Instagram. I'm not on social media a lot. I have Instagram. My handle is CJAMMER07. It's very convoluted. I've never bothered to change it, but that's what it is. It's CJAMMER07. And if you want to follow the work that our agency does, that's ohgosh.uk on Instagram, and our website is ohgosh.uk as well. So yeah, that's where you can find me, and hopefully you'll see a trailer on there, or a bunch of bits that are all to do with the film sooner rather than later.
Great to have you on, Cameron. It's absolutely amazing to hear your passion and your persistence to get this feature out there. So thanks for coming on.
No worries. Cheers, Oscar.